What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time, we're taking a look at Cabin in the Woods, directed by Goddard and co-written by Goddard and Josh Whedon. Cabin in the Woods tells the story of these four college friends who go to a remote and deserted cabin as they take on a variety of different monsters. All the while, these events are being manipulated by an underground facility. Okay, so that's the overall gist of Cabin in the Woods. Let's talk about it. I have been waiting, let's just say, over a decade to finally give this movie a chance. And after having my first viewing, I can honestly say that I thought Cabin in the Woods was a lot of fun. This is a good horror comedy. I don't think this movie is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I think the overall end game comes across as just a little forced and kind of takes away from what came before it. But as an overall package, I found this to be highly entertaining. I think this movie has a lot of clever writing to it. Then again, one of the co-writers is Josh Whedon, and Josh Whedon is known for having a deconstructive nature to his writing and also injecting a lot of comedy into his writing. And you have Drew Goddard, who is also a very talented writer and also a very talented director as well. So when you put these two guys together, you get a movie like this, which pretty much pokes fun at and deconstructs the horror genre as a whole. Yes, this is another horror movie that focuses on deconstructing the genre. The deconstructive horror genre, the deconstructive nature of horror has become a genre all unto its own, which I think has been is being overplayed way too much. Now it's getting to the point where you got to be creative in your deconstructive nature, and I think Cabin in the Woods does a pretty overall decent job at deconstructing the horror genre, particularly that of movies like The Evil Dead and supernatural movies like that. I'll say this: the cast and the characters in this movie, they're all fine for what they are. You know, you have notable actors like Chris Hemsworth, Richard Jenkins, and Bradford Whitford, who are in this movie. You also have a cameo by Sigourney Weaver at the end. You know, it's not that this movie is devoid of talent, because it has plenty of talent. The story, it starts off really interesting, and I like it for what it is up until the third act, in which I think it goes off the rails a lot. Like, the first two acts are really good, and the first half of the third act is good until you get to the over explanation as to why everything is going on, and then you just lose me. That's where I think the movie goes from being a criticism of horror to pretty much playing into the tropes itself by pretty much having this over-the-top, over-explanatory endgame, to which I'm just like, yeah, you know what? You took away a lot from what this movie could have really been. And like I said, my biggest gripe is that the last half of the third act, where they try to explain everything, I think that's the movie's biggest flaw, because it takes away from everything that came before it. So I like the whole thing of this thing being like a social experiment. Like, these people in an underground facility are manipulating these horrible events for these characters to go through. But it's like, it's almost as if they're deconstructing. But it's a deconstructive nature of what we see in a horror movie. Like, for instance, when someone says, "Hey, let's split up," we find out that it's actually a pheromones that's manipulating your brain into making these decisions. Also another thing, like if a character picks up like this artifact or something, that artifact is connected to a particular monster that's going to show up and wreak havoc. So I do like how that stuff has an explanation to it and a more grounded reality. Like, say for example, we live in a real world where monsters exist, and we have these people hiding underground doing social experiments. Like, hey, if you pick up this certain thing, they're going to unleash this certain monster that's specific to that certain thing. Like, there's a scene where a character reads a diary, and that diary is about a zombified family that attacks them, and that zombified family is what starts to wreak havoc. Like, that idea I like. The whole idea of a social experiment I like. Again, once you get to the third act, and it's revealed to us that all this is being done to pretty much keep an ancient evil at bay from destroying the world, that's where you lose me, and that's where I think this thing goes into the cliche of, we had an idea, we just didn't know how to end this idea, so let's just throw this out there. And that I don't like. And that's my biggest gripe, is, you had to put this end of the world scenario into this movie, and it just doesn't fit. It feels very awkward, feels very janky, to me at least. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's just briefly go over just the events that take place in this movie. So, like I said, the four friends that we follow, they're fine for what they are. I don't remember their names. I more or less remember what their archetype is. You know, you have the athlete played by Chris Hemsworth. You got the scholar, the virgin, the whore, and the fool. I think all these actors play really, really well off one another. The character, the fool, is the one I really like. Is the one that I actually grew to like throughout the course of the movie, mainly because he's a pothead and a weed head, and it's actually him smoking the weed and pot is what makes him immune. Is what makes him immune to most of the stuff that's going around. Most of the stuff that's going around, and he's actually the first character to actually find out what exactly it is going on in this deserted cabin. So I actually kind of like that. The movie actually turned a trope on its head, in which the pothead never knows what's going on. In this movie, the pothead does know what's going on. I actually thought that was actually pretty clever and actually pretty cool. You have the athlete played by Chris Hemsworth. He's fine for what he is. He's his archetype. He doesn't give the world's most groundbreaking performance. His character isn't all that deep, but it was fun to watch. The actress who played his girlfriend, she was fine too. She's actually the first to die, but she's fine. Her archetype is that of the slutty friend who wants to sleep around. Then you have the scholar who's in love with the virgin character. I mean, their relationship is okay. It's not really developed to the point where I want to see them get together, mainly because once you get to the second half of the movie, he gets taken out by having like a spike go through his throat. So he doesn't really last long. Then you got the virgin character, and she's fine. You know, she's okay. I mean, she ain't the best final girl you'll ever see in a horror movie. I mean, I'll give her credit. She takes a hell of a beating as the movie progresses, and she holds her own. Even when at the end, when she gets bitten by a werewolf, she still has enough energy to smoke some weed with Fool as the world is coming to an end. So I thought that was actually pretty funny. The actors who play members of this underground facility, you know, you got Bradford Whitford and Richard Jenkins. These are two just, you know, journeyman actors who pop up in everything, and they're fun. And I like their whole dynamic of them constantly of this whole facility doing Deadpools as to who is going to live first or who is going to die. I kind of like all that stuff. They turned a game out of people's misery. And again, they're controlling and manipulating events, which I think is the most interesting aspect out of this entire movie. And I think if you had taken that whole end of the world aspect out and just had this been a social experiment in fear and stuff like that, I think that could have been a cool deconstruct. That itself would have been a fine deconstructive nature, instead of this whole end of the world plot, which completely makes viewing this movie have an entire different experience. Because now we're just watching these people torture people, all to appease a greater evil. It's kind of dumb, to be honest with you. Kind of lame, kind of generic, and it's kind of a waste of a good story. And actually a really good movie that has a lot of good things in it. Like, I like the gore. I like the look of some of the monsters. They're pretty cool. I like the scene where Fool and Virgin are going down in the underground tunnel, and you see like just different varieties of monsters, like werewolves, a giant cobra snake, a killer clown, and a whole bunch of different assortment of creatures that get unleashed on this facility and wreak havoc in the third act. Like, this is the third act that I like. The first half of the third act, where the monsters are going out of control in this facility, hell of a lot of gory fun. I mean, the CG is really bad. Then again, it's a low budget movie, so you get what you can get. But to Drew Goddard's credit, he did have a good blend of CG and practical effects. Like, I like a lot of the looks of some of these monsters. Like, you have one monster that is very reminiscent of Pinhead, but he has like these saw blades in his head, and he's carrying around this box that's very familiar to the lament configuration from Hellraiser. You got this giant ass cobra snake that's just wreaking havoc. You got this overgrown bat that's destroying everything. You got a werewolf that's running around. You got creepy kids, killer clowns. Like I said, it's like a whole bunch of different stuff, and I like it. Like, I like the carnage candy of the third act up until Sigourney Weaver makes her cameo appearance and over explains everything. And that to me is where the movie falters, because it goes into a generic thing, and it kind of makes everything I watched up to this point just because it was a good deconstruction. You know, like when the kids meet the creepy gas station attendant, we find out that he's part of this facility who was just like a doomsayer, who's like a riff on doomsayers and stuff like that. And there's also this funny running gag where he's on speakerphone. He's constantly complaining, am I on speaker? Do you have me on speaker? That's not cool. Like, that stuff is funny. Like, a lot of the comedy in this movie, some of it works, and some of it... Oh, actually, no. The majority of the comedy in this movie really does work, and it's just through dialogue or just through the way characters react to certain situations. Yeah. With all that being said, I still overall very much enjoyed Cabin in the Woods. Despite the last half of the third act not being my cup of tea, I overall think this is a very solid and very entertaining horror comedy that is really well done by two very, very talented guys. Say what you want about Joss Whedon and his personal life and all the things he's being accused of. As a talent, you can't deny that the man knows what he's doing. And Drew Goddard, he's another guy. He knows what he's doing. And they come together and made a very good and very, very good movie. So with all that being said, I'm going to give Cabin in the Woods a solid 8 out of 10. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe. And I'll check you back next time for more.